It's time. Hi everyone, I'm Jacob. I'm the Cowhat Librarian, and I've been waiting for this one. I had this idea a few months back, and it's been in my mind ever since then. I've written down notes about it in my phone, I've made post-it notes, I've planned for it and thought about it, and ultimately waited for the publication of Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Sleigh, which there should be a video on my channel about my thoughts on that one, so please go check it out. Because I have wanted to do my official, cannot be argued with, inescapably great tier list for the Pigeon books by Mo Willems. Now, there is one caveat. I am sticking with the main books that have been published in hardcover. I'm not worrying about the board books because they have a different format. I'm not worried about the activity book. And while I thought it was funny, I'm not going to talk about Be the Bus because it is something completely different and something I had to sit and explain the jokes in to my children when reading it with them. I'm going to stick to the mainline books here, but I think there's lots to talk about. So first up, 20 years ago, folks, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, the book that started it all. This was groundbreaking for its time. There were certainly other books that had broken the fourth wall and spoken to the reader, but none had done so effectively. Willems created one of the most iconic picture book characters with crayon outlines and gave this character real charisma and attitude and heart, and this is one of the best picture books of all time. There's no doubt about it. And there's only one place this one can end up, the S tier. A year later, in 2004, it was followed by The Pigeon Finds a Hot Dog. Now, I don't have a copy here, or I would be holding it up dramatically. But that book featured the introduction of the Duckling, who was a very, very fun character in a couple Pigeon books, a sort of semi-friend, semi-rival that felt almost like Willems was trying to create the equivalent of Garfield and Nermal, but for the Pigeon books. And it was fine, it was good, it was funny, but ultimately it was one of the lesser entries in my opinion. Now I should note that this scale, this tier list that I'm building, is just ranking the Pigeon books relative to each other. Because the reality is, even a D tier Pigeon book is still better than 3/4 of the picture books out there. But in this case, The Pigeon Finds a Hot Dog, I think it fits in the C tier. It's definitely one of the lesser Pigeon books, despite the Duckling's inclusion. Okay, and then in 2005, we have Don't Let the Pigeon Stay Up Late. And this one was great. The Duckling was a fun character to introduce, but this got back to the formula that was so effective in Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, where it's just a simple request. Hey reader, don't let the pigeon stay up late. And his reactions to it are first very, very funny, but second, very, very familiar to parents dealing with their own kids and trying to get them to bed. In my opinion, this was not only very good, but if it had been published first, we would be talking about this as the legendary picture book that Mo Willems produced. It would have taken the spot of Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus as this beloved classic. But because it was following a trend, because it was following the formula, I can't rank it quite as highly. Still, it's near the top. Don't Let the Pigeon Stay Up Late is A tier as far as I'm concerned. And then Willems let the series sit fallow for a couple of years. and returned in 2008 with The Pigeon Wants a Puppy. I have a copy of it somewhere. I could not find it when I was looking the other night, but it established sort of a new premise for the Pigeon books. The pigeon wanting something, breaking down the reader until he gets what he wants and finding out, whoops, this thing is secretly terrible. And the premise of him wanting the puppy was hilarious. The idea that the pigeon really didn't know much about puppies, that they needed fresh air and sunshine and needed to be watered, was really, really funny. And the pigeon just going on and on about the teeth and the slobber and the drool. Did I mention the teeth? Was very, very funny, even after he'd escaped from the puppy. It was really, really good. It was a solid entry by all margins. Is it enough to put it up in the classics of the Pigeon series? Maybe not. I'd put it as a B tier book. Okay. And then Williams took another break until 2012, and he came back with The Duckling Gets a Cookie, a return of the pigeon's sidekick, where he gets a cookie and the pigeon can't figure out why and throws a tantrum about it until the duckling very kindly gives it to him. This is one of the weaker entries. The premise was funny, but the pigeon comes across as extra whiny and tantrumy in this one. Instead of just asking the reader for a cookie the way he would ask so directly in the other books, he whines about the unfairness of life and whines at the duckling. And the resolution is pretty silly too. The duckling gives him the cookie, the pigeon walks off, talks about how the duckling is nice, and then the duckling asks for another cookie, but this time with no nuts. And I never got it. I did not get the joke at the end. My wife's interpretation was just that the duckling didn't really like nuts in the first place, so he was happy to hand off the cookie to the pigeon and that he'd just get one that was made in a way he liked. And I think she's probably right. I suppose there's also the interpretation that the duckling is claiming that the pigeon is nuts and he wants a cookie without the nut this time. And that's funny, but I don't think either of those come through very well, especially to an audience of kids. It had the duckling back and it's fun to see the duckling again, but I think it's one of the weaker efforts. I think it's down in the C tier, to be perfectly honest. So, 2 years after that, my wife and I were wandering through a bookstore and we stumbled onto this one without even realizing Williams was working on a new one. The Pigeon Needs a Bath. And this, again, was a return to form. The introduction by the bus driver, this time concerned that the pigeon is dirty. The pigeon's insinuations that he doesn't really smell, it's a normal smell for a pigeon. The appearance of the flies coming in and smelling him and saying, "Pee, you stink, take a bath, dude," is hilarious. Easily one of the funniest things to come out of any of the Pigeon books. The 2-page spread where he has so many complaints. The other books sufficed with 8 panels, maybe a dozen. This one went whole hog and did about 30 panels across 2 pages where the water was too hot, too cold, too hot, too cold, not enough toys, too many toys, too reflective. It is absolutely hilarious. It always gets a big laugh when I read it to a group of children. My kids love it. I love it. This is easily one of the tops. It's an A-tier Pigeon book, no question about it. And as an added bonus, the fact that you can use the SpongeBob voice when talking about how long he was in the bathtub and say 10 hours later is just an added bonus. It's the icing on the cake. Okay, unfortunately I don't have a copy of the next 2 handy here. The Pigeon Has to Go to School in 2019. I was so excited for this one. Back to school stuff is big. It had been a couple of years since The Pigeon Needs a Bath, and at my public library at the time, I ordered 3 copies for a children's department because I was so confident it was going to be great. And it was. The Pigeon's worries about school were very, very human, very relatable to kids getting ready for their first time going to school. His gradual realization that all the things he wanted to get him ready for school were in fact part of the purpose of school was really funny, and the payoff was huge. The idea that he's gradually coming around, but he doesn't even know how he's going to get there, and then seeing the school bus. It was a payoff 16 years in the making, that the Pigeon who just wanted to drive the bus was going to get to ride a school bus to school. It was perfect. It was the only Pigeon book to build off of that original concept and bring it back to the Pigeon wanting to ride the bus. And this one, it could go either way. I think it's got to go A tier just because I don't think you can have more than one in that very top spot. But it's close. It's so close to going up into S. It was incredible. Which makes it so much harder to talk about last year's book. 2022's The Pigeon Will Ride the Roller Coaster. It fell flat for me. The Pigeon was going to go off and ride the roller coaster, and he got excited about it and figured out how he'd deal with things, and he went on, and it was underwhelming, but when he got a chance to go on again, he was excited, and it all ran flat. The build-up wasn't there, the payoff wasn't there, there was no comeuppance for the Pigeon, there was no point where he learned a lesson, there was no real exuberant thing. There wasn't even downtime between him finishing the lackluster roller coaster and having a minute to think before getting the offer to do it again and then jumping at the chance. And it's a shame too, because Willems covered that same territory so well in the Unlimited Squirrels book, Guess What? Where he had a similar story of a character anticipating something and waiting for it and going and being underwhelmed by it, but it being okay in a very funny way. The Pigeon Will Ride the Roller Coaster, it was flatter than the roller coaster he rides. This one, unfortunately, goes down on the D tier by itself. And last but not least, Willems produced a Christmas Pigeon book this year. Don't Let the Pigeon Ride the Sleigh. And I did a video about it, and it's on my channel, and I recommend you go watch it for my full thoughts on the book. It was really good. Santa himself is in this one instead of a bus driver, and he asks the reader to not let the pigeon drive the sleigh. The Pigeon has a hat that adds an extra touch of physical comedy to the whole thing, from his pleading to his tantrum to his grumpy face, where his grumpiness has become so powerful that it takes physical form and his hat can hang on it. It was really, really good, and the only thing lacking is that I felt the book would have been better with a few extra pages, with a slightly different resolution with Santa. Again, go watch my other video if you want my full explanation. It was good, it was a return to form, but it's not one of the greats. This one goes in the B tier, in my opinion. There you have it, folks. That's my official, I'm fairly certain unarguable, tier list for Mo Willems' Pigeon books. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on this. I'm sure one or two of you will take issue with my ordering for the books, and that's just fine. This is a fun conversation that we can have. But in my opinion, there were some that were just solid gold and they were in the S and A tier, and there were a couple lesser entries. And that's fine. Like I said before, even the D tier Pigeon books are still better than 3/4 of the picture books out there. They're still solid. It's just they're not Mo Willems solid. With that, thanks for listening to me give my completely biased opinion on all of this stuff. By all means, please like, please subscribe, and please check back and see what else I have to talk about from the Cowhat Library. Thank you. Bye now.